She had never imagined her life would take such a turn. For as long as she could remember, her life had been hers to control. A career, a small circle of friends, and a sense of independence. She was content. She never thought about becoming a mother. It wasn't that she didn't like kids. It just wasn't in her plans. She thought she would be the aunt who visited on holidays. Always the fun one, but never the responsible one. But life has a way of changing things when you least expect it. It started with a phone call in the middle of her afternoon. The voice on the other end was shaky, filled with sorrow, but the words still hit her like a punch in the stomach. Her sister, her younger sister, who had just started her own family, had passed away suddenly. The doctor said it was a complication no one saw coming. Her sister's husband, too, was in shock, unable to handle the loss. It was an unbearable tragedy. In the blink of an eye, everything changed. She felt a rush of emotions, disbelief, grief, and beneath it all, a deep sense of responsibility. She was the only one left who could take care of her niece. The baby her sister had only just started raising. It wasn't a question. It was simply what needed to be done. The very next day, she found herself standing in her sister's house looking at the small crib where the baby girl had once slept. It felt surreal, like she was in a dream. This wasn't her life. This wasn't the life she had planned for herself. But there she was, about to become the one person in the world who could take care of this child. She walked slowly toward the crib, unsure of what to do next. The baby, barely a few months old, lay peacefully asleep, unaware of the whirlwind that had just upended her world. She stood there, taking in the sight of her niece for the first time since her birth. The baby's face, innocent and soft, seemed to radiate a kind of calmness that made her want to protect her with everything she had. At that moment, she knew there was no going back. The decision had been made for her. She would raise this child as her own. The first few days were a blur of paperwork, meetings with social workers, and arrangements she never imagined she would have to make. But there was no time to waste. She needed to get everything in order. There were no other family members who could take on this responsibility. The baby's father was distant, hardly present in her life, and her sister's extended family was too scattered to help. She didn't have any children of her own. She wasn't even sure if she was ready to be a mother, but there was no question in her mind that she had to do this. Her niece needed her. The adjustment was harder than she could have imagined. The first night she brought the baby home, she stared at the little face in the crib, unsure of what to do. She had never taken care of an infant before. The baby had been used to the comfort and routine of her mother's care, and now she was with someone who barely knew how to change a diaper or soothe her cries. But she quickly learned. The first time she successfully fed the baby, she felt a small sense of victory. The first time the baby fell asleep in her arms, she felt a deep warmth spread through her chest. These small victories, these first moments, were the foundation upon which everything else would be built. Her friends were supportive, but she could tell they didn't understand the gravity of the situation. How could they? She hadn't just become a mother. She had become a mother out of nowhere, thrust into the role by tragedy. Her life had been completely upended, and she had to find her new rhythm. There were moments when she wanted to give up, when she felt too tired to keep going. She wasn't sure how to balance her new life with her career, or if she could continue her own dreams while raising a child who wasn't hers by blood. But every time she looked at her niece, the doubts faded. She couldn't let her down. This was her responsibility now, and she had to make it work. There were sleepless nights. The baby woke up crying, and she didn't always know what to do. There were moments when she was so exhausted that she wasn't sure if she could keep going, but she always found the strength to get up and try again. Because the baby needed her. Gradually, the baby began to adjust. She grew stronger, more aware of the world around her. Her eyes would follow the woman around the room, and sometimes she would smile when their eyes met. It was as if the baby could sense that she wasn't just a temporary caretaker. She was her new mother. In the months that followed, the woman's life slowly started to revolve around her niece. She learned how to juggle work, her social life, and parenting. Every day was a new challenge, but with each challenge came a new reward. The first time the baby said, "Mama," the woman's heart swelled. It wasn't a word the baby had learned in the traditional sense. It was a word she had learned out of love, out of necessity. And it was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. There were still tough days. There were still moments when she felt completely lost, unsure of what to do next. But with every passing day, she realized something important. She was no longer just a woman taking care of a child who wasn't hers. She was becoming a mother. Her love for the baby was real, even though they weren't connected by blood. The bond between them had formed slowly, but it was unbreakable. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, of questioning whether she was doing the right thing. She thought about her sister and the life that had been taken from her too soon. She thought about the future and what kind of mother she could be for a child who had lost so much, but she also thought about how much she had to give, how much love she could offer. She wasn't just raising her niece. She was giving her a chance at a full life, a life filled with love and stability, something the baby's biological parents couldn't provide. And so, day by day, the woman learned how to be a mother. She learned how to give, how to love, how to sacrifice, and how to grow. She was no longer just an aunt. She was a mother in every sense of the word, even if she had never planned on being one. The days passed slowly, each one filled with a new set of challenges. In the beginning, she felt overwhelmed. The house was never quiet anymore. There were always sounds, the soft hum of a baby's cry, the sound of bottles being prepared, the rustling of blankets being straightened. It was a far cry from the life she had known before, where her days were filled with work, meetings, and quiet evenings spent alone. Now there was always something to do, someone to care for, and she couldn't escape the constant reminder of the responsibility she had taken on. At first, the exhaustion was almost unbearable. The baby's sleep patterns were unpredictable, and so were her moods. There were nights when she felt like she had barely slept at all, but had still somehow managed to survive the day. The little things, getting her niece to sleep, feeding her, changing diapers, became monumental tasks. But there were small moments of joy too. The baby's first smile, the soft cooing sound she made as she played with a stuffed toy, and the way she wrapped her tiny fingers around the woman's hand were all little victories. Each one reminded her why she had agreed to take on this responsibility. Despite the exhaustion, the woman began to find a new rhythm in her life. She created a schedule, one that worked for her and the baby. She didn't have much time for herself anymore, but she made it work. Her mornings were spent feeding and dressing her niece, getting her ready for the day. She would then leave for work, feeling guilty every time she left her little one with a sitter or a friend. But when she returned, there was always that sweet little face waiting for her, and it made all the sacrifices worth it. Her career, which had once been the center of her world, now took a back seat. She had to be at home more, which meant less time for meetings, late nights at the office, or the freedom she once had. But she didn't mind. What she had once considered important no longer seemed as vital as the tiny life she was responsible for. Her focus had shifted completely. It was no longer just about her career or her own ambitions. It was about providing for this little girl, making sure she had everything she needed. There were moments of doubt, though. She still had questions in her mind, ones that gnawed at her. Was she doing the right thing? Was she capable of being a good mother, even though she hadn't planned on being one? Was she enough for her niece? The baby had been through so much in her short life, and it made the woman worry. She was constantly wondering if she was doing enough to give her niece the life she deserved. She tried not to let these thoughts consume her. Instead, she focused on the little things, the way her niece laughed when she made funny faces, the way she clung to her when she was upset. Every day, their bond grew stronger, and with each passing day, the woman started to feel more like a mother and less like someone who had been thrown into this role by circumstance. The baby began to grow, reaching new milestones. She learned how to sit up on her own, then how to crawl. It was exciting to watch her become more aware of the world around her. But as much as she was growing, the woman felt like she was also growing. She was learning what it meant to be a mother, not just in the practical sense, but in the emotional sense as well. She was discovering the depths of her love for this child, a love that had formed without her even realizing it. She loved her as if she had always been her own. The baby also began to show signs of her own personality. She had her favorite toys, a little stuffed bear that she clung to every night, and a love for music. The woman would play soft lullabies while she rocked the baby to sleep. And sometimes the little one would hum along, her eyes heavy with sleep, but her face lit up with the joy of the music. Those moments were precious, moments that made all the hard days seem worth it. But not everyone understood her decision to raise her niece. While her close friends and a few family members supported her, there were others who didn't think she was making the right choice. Some told her that she was too young, too independent to take on the responsibility of raising a child. They said that it wasn't fair to her to give up her life for someone else's. Others questioned whether she was even qualified to raise a child. After all, she didn't have children of her own. There were even comments from people who thought the baby's biological father should take over the responsibility. She tried to ignore the judgment, but sometimes it stung. There were moments when she felt lonely, like she was the only one in the world who understood what she was going through. But every time she looked at her niece, every time she saw the little face light up with a smile or heard her giggle, the doubts faded. She wasn't just raising a child who wasn't hers by blood. She was raising a child who needed her, who loved her, and who had become a part of her in a way she couldn't explain. The woman knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges to face, more sleepless nights, more tears, more difficult decisions. But she also knew that she would face them all with the same determination that had led her to this point. She wasn't going to give up, not when she had come so far. She had started this journey out of a sense of duty. But somewhere along the way, it had turned into something much deeper. The love she felt for the baby wasn't just a feeling of responsibility. It was a love that grew with each passing day. She wasn't just taking care of a child who wasn't hers by birth. She was shaping a life, guiding a little one into the world and becoming the mother she never expected to be. And as the baby grew, so did the woman. She was learning how to be patient, how to love unconditionally, and how to let go of her old life in order to embrace this new chapter. There were still doubts, still fears about whether she was enough. But when she looked at her niece, when she saw the joy in her eyes, she knew deep down that she was doing the right thing. Her life had been turned upside down in the most unexpected way, but it had also been filled with a love she never could have imagined. And with that love, she knew she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the months went by, the woman's life began to feel like a blur of routines. The days blended together, work, caring for her niece, late nights and early mornings. Yet, despite the exhaustion, she found herself growing more and more accustomed to the new rhythm. Each day, she learned more about herself and more about the little girl she was raising. At first, it had been difficult. Every milestone, every cry, every sleepless night had felt overwhelming. But gradually, things started to settle. The baby, now a toddler, began to grow more independent. She started walking, then talking, and each new step was an accomplishment for both of them. The woman marveled at how much her niece had changed in such a short time. It was as if they were both evolving together, learning from each other. Her house, once a quiet space, was now filled with laughter and noise. There were toys scattered across the floor, crayons and markers everywhere, and the constant hum of activity. The woman found herself enjoying the chaos in a way she hadn't expected. There was something comforting about it, something that reminded her that she wasn't alone. The little girl, who had once been a helpless infant, was now a lively toddler with a personality all her own. The woman began to realize that she had found a new sense of purpose. She wasn't just taking care of her niece out of obligation anymore. She was doing it because she wanted to. The love she felt for the little girl was real, not just out of duty, but because the bond between them had grown so strong. She had become a mother in every sense of the word, even though she hadn't planned for it. The baby, who had once been a stranger to her, had become her world. The changes weren't just happening in their home. The woman's friends and family began to see a difference in her as well. She had always been independent, someone who had focused on her career and personal goals. But now she was different. She was more patient, more selfless, and more connected to the world around her. Her priorities had shifted. Where once she had been focused on her own ambitions, now her focus was on giving her niece the best life possible. There were moments of doubt, of course. There were days when the woman wondered if she was doing the right thing. Was she enough for her niece? Was she giving her everything she needed? There were times when she felt overwhelmed by the responsibilities of motherhood. She hadn't planned on becoming a mother, and yet here she was trying to navigate the complexities of raising a child. But every time she looked at her niece, every time she saw the joy in her eyes or the way her face lit up when she saw her, the doubts began to fade. As the woman continued to raise her niece, she realized that the love between them was something deeper than blood. The child wasn't hers by birth, but she was hers in every other way. She had taken on the role of mother without question, and that role had changed her. She had learned what it meant to sacrifice, to love unconditionally, and to put someone else's needs before her own. Her niece, too, had adapted to her new life. She had come to see the woman not just as a caretaker, but as a mother. The child had formed her own attachment to her, and every hug, every kiss, and every "I love you" was a reminder of the bond they shared. The woman wasn't just taking care of her niece. She was shaping her future. She was the one teaching her how to love, how to be kind, and how to navigate the world. There were times when the woman struggled with the fact that the child wasn't hers by birth. She wondered if her niece ever felt like something was missing, if she ever wondered about her biological family. The woman tried to make sure that her niece knew about her biological mother, telling her stories about her sister and the kind of person she had been. She didn't want the child to feel like she didn't belong, but at the same time, she knew that their bond was just as strong, if not stronger, than any biological connection. They had become a family in every sense of the word, and that was all that mattered. As the baby grew into a child, the woman began to take on new challenges. There were school events to attend, doctor's appointments, and the everyday hurdles of raising a young child. But with every new challenge, the woman felt more confident in her role as a mother. She was no longer just doing this because she had to. She was doing it because it was the right thing to do, because it was the life she had chosen. Her life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. The career that had once been her main focus now seemed less important. She no longer cared about climbing the corporate ladder or working long hours. What mattered most was her niece, the little girl who had come into her life and completely transformed it. She realized that she was living a life that was full of purpose, even if it wasn't the life she had originally planned. But despite the joy, there were still moments of difficulty. There were days when the woman felt like she was stretched too thin, when the pressure of being both a mother and a career woman felt overwhelming. There were nights when she wished for just a few hours of peace, a time to herself to recharge. But she also knew that those moments were fleeting. The little girl who was now her daughter needed her, and that need was greater than any of her own desires. As the years passed, the woman's love for her niece only deepened. The little girl was no longer a baby, but a young child with her own personality, her own dreams, and her own quirks. She had grown into someone who was strong, compassionate, and full of life. The woman watched with pride as her niece took on new challenges, made new friends, and learned more about the world. And through it all, the woman never stopped being there for her. She had become the one constant in her niece's life, the one person she could always count on. The woman had raised a child that wasn't hers by blood, but in every way that mattered, she was her daughter. She had loved her, cared for her, and sacrificed for her. And in return, she had received a love that was as deep and unconditional as anything she had ever known. The woman knew that there would still be challenges ahead. There would still be moments of doubt, moments when she questioned if she was doing the right thing. But she also knew that she had built something beautiful, something that was worth fighting for. She had raised a child who wasn't hers by birth, but who was hers in every other way. And that, she realized, was the most important thing of all. The years passed, and with each one, the woman found herself more deeply connected to the child she had raised. It was hard to believe that the little girl who had once been a baby in her arms was now growing into an independent, strong-willed child with her own ideas about the world. Time, it seemed, had flown by, and so much had changed. But as the child grew older, new challenges arose. The woman had always known that raising her niece wasn't going to be easy, but she hadn't anticipated how complicated things would become as the girl reached her preteen years. She had become more curious, more independent, and like most children her age, more aware of the world around her. One of the first hurdles was the questions that the girl began asking about her biological parents. It was a conversation the woman had hoped would never come up, but as the child grew older, it became inevitable. The little girl was starting to understand that her story was different from the stories of her friends. She was beginning to notice that she didn't have the same family structure as most of the children she interacted with. At first, she asked simple questions like, "Where's my mommy?" or "Why don't I look like you?" The woman had prepared for these moments, but no matter how much she had anticipated them, the pain of answering these questions was always sharp. She never wanted the child to feel that she was different. She had always done her best to provide a loving, stable home, But as the girl got older, the woman realized that she could no longer shield her from the truth. She had to explain in the gentlest way possible why her biological mother wasn't there. It wasn't easy. The child didn't fully understand the depth of the situation, and sometimes it felt like there was a gap between what the woman wanted to protect her from and what the girl needed to know. The first real conversation came one evening, when the girl, now about 10 years old, sat beside her in the living room, her small face serious. "I don't remember my mommy," the child said, her voice filled with confusion. "Why did she leave me?" The woman took a deep breath. She wasn't ready for this, but she had to be. She gently explained what had happened. The sudden illness that took her sister's life, how she had stepped in to care for her when no one else could. She told her that her biological mother had loved her deeply, but sometimes life is unpredictable, and things happen that we can't control. It wasn't easy to say, but the girl listened quietly, her eyes never leaving the woman's face. There were moments of silence, and then the child said, "But why didn't my daddy come and get me?" That question hit the woman harder than she had anticipated. The truth was, the child's biological father had barely been involved in her life. He had promised to step up, but the woman knew that he had never truly been there. She explained that sometimes people make promises they can't keep, and that was why she had stepped in to raise her. The girl's eyes were full of sadness, but the woman could see something else there too: understanding. The hardest part was yet to come. The little girl's next question, though quiet, felt like it carried the weight of the world. "Do you think I'll ever meet my daddy?" The woman paused for a long moment. She didn't want to lie to the child, but she also didn't want to create false hope. The man had been distant, and it wasn't clear if he ever would show up. She didn't want to make promises she couldn't keep. "I don't know," she said softly, "but I want you to know that no matter what, you're not alone. You have me, and I'll always be here for you." The girl nodded, though the uncertainty in her eyes remained. It was a tough conversation, one that left both of them exhausted, but they had crossed an important bridge. From that moment on, the woman realized that the girl was beginning to navigate her own identity, and part of that process was understanding where she came from, even if it was a difficult truth. As time went on, the girl's questions became more frequent. It wasn't just about her biological family anymore. She was asking about herself. She wanted to know why she looked the way she did, why she had certain traits, and where they came from. The woman did her best to answer these questions as honestly as she could, but it was hard not to feel like something was missing. The girl was seeking something beyond the answers she was getting, something she couldn't fully explain. Despite the difficulties, the woman kept reminding herself that these were important steps in the child's development. As hard as it was to answer some of the girl's questions, it was essential for her to explore who she was and where she came from. She couldn't shield her from the reality of her background, no matter how much she wanted to protect her. But alongside these difficult moments, there were many joyful ones. The woman began to see how much the child had grown, not just physically but emotionally and intellectually. The girl was maturing into someone who could think for herself, make her own decisions, and express her feelings. At times, the woman was amazed at how perceptive and thoughtful she had become. She had raised a child who wasn't just grateful for the life she had been given, but who was also learning to face the world on her own terms. One of the happiest moments came when the girl took part in a school play. It was a small part, nothing too flashy, but when the woman saw her standing on stage looking so confident and proud, she couldn't help but tear up. The girl had worked so hard for this role, practicing lines every night and rehearsing with her friends. When the curtain came down, the woman was the first to give her a hug, proud of how far she had come. The woman also noticed that the girl was starting to open up more about her feelings. In the past, she had kept many things to herself, unsure of how to express what she was going through. But now she was talking more, sharing her joys and frustrations. She began to talk about her friends, her hopes for the future, and even the little things that made her happy. And as the woman listened, she realized how much they had both grown in the time they had spent together. The child had become a reflection of the love and care the woman had poured into her. But despite the progress they had made, the woman knew there was still more to navigate. The girl wasn't a little child anymore. She was growing into a teenager, with all the complexity that came with it. The woman could see that she was becoming more independent, more sure of herself. There would still be tough moments ahead, moments when the girl would struggle with who she was and where she belonged, and the woman was ready. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but she was committed to being there for her no matter what. She had already weathered so many storms, and their bond was stronger than ever. The love between them had been built on years of sacrifice, patience, and shared experiences, and it was unshakable. She had raised a child who wasn't hers by blood, but who had become her daughter in every way that mattered. The road had been difficult at times, but it had also been incredibly rewarding. She had given the girl the love and stability she needed, and in return, the girl had given her a sense of purpose that she had never known before. No matter what came next, the woman knew one thing for certain: she was ready to face it. Together they would continue to build their life, one step at a time. As the years passed, the woman began to reflect on the journey that had led her to this point. It was hard to believe how much had changed since that day when she first took her niece into her arms, a small and fragile baby in need of love and care. Back then she had been unsure of herself, overwhelmed by the responsibility of raising a child who wasn't hers. But now, as the girl grew into a confident and strong young woman, the woman realized how far they had come. The girl was no longer the toddler who had clung to her at every moment. She was becoming her own person, with her own dreams and aspirations. It was bittersweet to watch her grow. While the woman was proud of the young woman she was becoming, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness at how quickly the years had gone by. It seemed like just yesterday that the girl had needed her for everything, and now she was becoming more independent every day. One of the hardest parts of watching her niece grow up was realizing that she would soon be ready to face the world on her own. The girl was approaching her high school years, a time when the woman knew she would need to let go even more. She had been there for every milestone: her first day of school, her first soccer game, her first heartbreak. But soon there would be bigger challenges ahead. The woman couldn't protect her from everything, and she knew that. She had done her best to equip her with the tools she needed to navigate the world, but it was up to the girl now to find her own way. The woman often found herself thinking about the future, wondering what it would hold for both of them. She knew that she wouldn't always be there physically to help her niece with every decision or every setback. The girl was growing into a young woman who would eventually leave for college, or perhaps go off to pursue her dreams elsewhere. But even as the woman grappled with the idea of letting go, she knew that their bond would remain. It was a bond that had been built on love, sacrifice, and trust. It wasn't just a connection of blood, it was a connection of the heart. But letting go wasn't easy. As the girl entered her teenage years, she began to push boundaries. It wasn't that she was rebellious, but she was finding her voice. She wanted to make her own decisions, to carve out her own identity, and that meant testing the limits. Sometimes this caused tension between them. There were disagreements, moments when the woman didn't understand the choices the girl was making. It was hard for the woman to let go of the role she had played in her niece's life for so long. The protector, the guide, the constant source of love. The girl was beginning to question the things she had been taught, to explore the world and her place in it. The woman knew this was a natural part of growing up, but it didn't make it any easier. She had always done her best to provide the girl with a strong foundation. But as the girl reached her teenage years, it became clear that she was no longer the child who needed to be sheltered from the world. The woman had to accept that the girl was becoming an adult, and that meant allowing her the space to make her own decisions, even if those decisions weren't always the ones the woman would have made. There were nights when the woman lay awake thinking about the challenges ahead. She worried about how the girl would handle the pressures of growing up: school, friends, relationships, and the many decisions she would soon have to make on her own. The woman couldn't protect her from everything, and that was a reality she had to come to terms with. But what she could do was continue to offer her love and support no matter what. She could continue to be a source of guidance even from a distance, and remind the girl that she would always be there for her. The girl, for her part, was beginning to realize how much the woman had done for her. As she became more self-aware, she started to see the sacrifices the woman had made to raise her. She began to appreciate the love and care that had been given to her without question, without hesitation. And though they still had moments of tension, there were also moments of understanding. The girl had come to realize that the woman wasn't just her aunt or even just a guardian. She was her mother in every way that mattered. The love they shared wasn't just about biology. It was about the deep connection that had been formed over years of shared experiences, laughter, and tears. The woman saw the change in her niece as well. She saw the way the girl was beginning to make her own decisions, to express herself more openly, and to take more responsibility for her life. It was a proud moment for the woman to watch the girl take on more independence, to see her grow into a young adult who could stand on her own 2 feet. But it was also a reminder that the time was coming when she would have to let go. And letting go, though necessary, was one of the hardest things she had ever done. As the girl entered her final years of high school, the woman began to think more seriously about what the future would hold. She knew that the girl would likely go to college soon, and that would mark a new chapter in their lives. The woman had always known that this day would come, but now that it was approaching, she couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. She was proud of the young woman the girl had become, but she was also scared. The woman had always been there to guide her, to help her, and to be her anchor. But now the girl was going to be on her own more than ever before. The woman found herself having more conversations with the girl about the future. She talked to her about college, about life beyond high school, about the challenges that would come with adulthood. She offered advice, but she also gave the girl space to think for herself. She knew that the girl would have to make her own decisions, but she also knew that the foundation they had built together would help her through whatever came next. The day came when the girl was accepted into the college of her choice. It was a moment of celebration, a moment of pride, but also a moment of sorrow. The woman knew that this was the beginning of the end of one chapter and the start of a new one. Her niece, her daughter in every way that mattered, was about to embark on a new journey, one that would take her further away from the woman who had raised her. But even as the woman felt the weight of the moment, she knew that the love they shared would never change. No matter how far apart they were, no matter how many new experiences the girl would have, their bond would remain. The woman had raised a child who wasn't hers by blood, but who had become her daughter in every sense of the word. She had given everything she had to ensure the girl had a life filled with love, support, and opportunity. And as she watched the girl prepare to leave for college, she realized that the greatest gift she could give her now was the freedom to live her life and the confidence to know that she would always have a place to return to, a place where she was loved, unconditionally. The woman had never imagined that her life would unfold this way, but now, as she looked back on the years they had spent together, she knew that it had all been worth it. The sacrifices, the challenges, the heartache, everything had led them to this point. And she was proud of the young woman her niece had become, proud of the family they had built together, and proud of the love that had made it all possible. Their story was far from over. But whatever the future held, the woman knew that they would face it together with love and strength as a family. As the years went on, the woman and the girl's relationship deepened. It wasn't just that they were family. They had become partners in a way. They had experienced so much together, from moments of joy to times of deep struggle. The woman had raised a child who was now a young adult, with all the complexities and challenges that came with that stage of life. And the girl had become someone the woman was proud of, independent, thoughtful, and full of potential. But life wasn't always easy. The woman knew that even though her niece had grown into a strong, capable person, the world could be a difficult place. She wanted to protect her, to shield her from pain, but she also understood that this was no longer possible. The girl needed to experience life for herself with all its highs and lows. When the girl went off to college, the woman felt a mixture of pride and sadness. She had raised her from a baby to a young adult, and now she was taking on the world on her own. It was a bittersweet moment. The woman was happy that her niece was moving forward, but she also knew that their relationship would change. She wouldn't be there to guide her every step of the way anymore, and that thought was difficult to process. The first few months after the girl left for college were tough. The woman was proud of how well she was doing, but she missed her terribly. The house felt empty without the sounds of the girl's laughter, her music playing in the background, and the constant hum of activity. The woman often found herself thinking back to the early days, when the girl was just a baby and she had no idea what she was doing. How far they had come since then. In the beginning, the girl called often, sometimes to share good news, other times just to ask for advice. The woman was always there to listen, offering guidance when needed, but also giving her space to make her own choices. It was a delicate balance. She wanted to be there for the girl, but she also knew that the girl needed to find her own way. The woman also had to come to terms with the fact that her niece, the child she had raised, was no longer a child. She was becoming an adult, and that meant she was facing the world with a different perspective. There were times when they disagreed, when the girl made choices the woman didn't fully understand. But the woman knew that this was part of the process. The girl had to figure out who she was and what she wanted from life, and that meant making mistakes, learning, and growing. As the months went on, the woman began to adjust to the quieter life. She focused on her own interests, something she had put aside while raising the girl. She took up hobbies she had always wanted to try and spent more time with friends. But even as she found new things to fill her days, her thoughts often drifted to the girl. She wondered how she was doing, if she was happy, if she was making friends, and if she was finding her place in the world. One day, the woman received a call from the girl that would change everything. It was the kind of phone call that no parent ever wants to get. The girl's voice was shaky, and the woman could hear the fear in her words. "I need you," the girl said. "I don't know what to do." The woman's heart sank. She listened as the girl explained that she was struggling. College had been harder than she expected. She was overwhelmed by the workload, feeling lost and disconnected from the people around her. She had made friends, but they hadn't become the kind of close-knit group she had hoped for. And on top of all that, she was feeling homesick. She missed the woman more than she had expected. The woman listened carefully, offering words of encouragement, but she knew that the girl was going through something difficult. It wasn't just homesickness, it was the realization that growing up wasn't always as easy as it seemed. The world outside was full of challenges, and sometimes it felt like there was no one to turn to. After the call, the woman couldn't help but think back to when she had first taken the girl in. She had been so small, so innocent, and now she was a young adult facing the challenges of life. The woman knew that this was part of the process. The girl needed to learn how to navigate the world on her own. But that didn't make it any easier to see her struggle. The next few weeks were filled with long conversations and advice. The woman helped the girl find ways to manage her stress, to make connections with others, and to prioritize her mental health. She reminded her that it was okay to ask for help and that she didn't have to do everything alone. Slowly, the girl began to regain her confidence. She started reaching out to others, joining study groups, and making time for herself. The woman could hear the change in her voice when they spoke, the reassurance that she was beginning to find her way again. Even though the woman couldn't be there physically, she was still an important part of the girl's life. The bond they shared was unbreakable, even from a distance. The woman knew that the girl would face many more challenges in the years ahead. Relationships, careers, and the many choices that would shape her future. But she also knew that the girl had the strength to face whatever came her way. As the girl found her footing in college, the woman also began to realize that the time for letting go had come. She had raised this child, this young woman, who had now grown into someone capable of making her own decisions. It was both a triumph and a loss. The woman had done everything she could to prepare her, to give her the tools to succeed. And now it was up to the girl to find her own path. But even as the girl became more independent, the woman was there when she needed her. They still talked on the phone, still shared stories and advice. The woman was still the person the girl turned to when she needed comfort or guidance. Their relationship had evolved, but it had never been more meaningful. The woman reflected on how far they had come. She had never expected her life to turn out this way. She had never expected to raise a child who wasn't hers by birth, but who had become her daughter in every way that mattered. She had given so much of herself to this child, and in return, she had received a love that was beyond anything she could have imagined. As the girl continued her journey into adulthood, the woman knew that the future was full of unknowns. She didn't know what challenges lay ahead for either of them. But one thing was certain: their bond would remain strong. No matter how far apart they were, no matter how many changes life brought, they would always have each other. And as the woman watched the girl, now a young adult, make her way through life, she realized that she had done her job. She had raised a child who was strong, compassionate, and ready to face the world. She had given her everything she had, and in doing so, she had created a love that would last a lifetime. The years had passed, and the woman found herself reflecting more and more on the journey she and the girl had shared. So much had changed in the time they had spent together. The baby who had once been so fragile was now a young adult, stepping into the world with the confidence and courage she had nurtured over the years. Watching the girl grow had been a profound experience, one that had challenged the woman in ways she never expected, but also filled her heart with pride. As the girl entered her final year of college, it became even more apparent how much the woman's role had shifted. There were fewer phone calls, fewer texts, and moments when the woman wasn't the first person the girl turned to. It was the natural progression of life, but it didn't make it any easier. The woman knew that the girl was finally spreading her wings, ready to step into the world as an adult, and yet, there was a part of her that longed for the days when she was the one who held all the answers, when she was the one the girl relied on for everything. But the woman had always known this day would come. The time when the girl would no longer need her in the same way. She had raised her, loved her, and given everything she had to ensure she would grow into someone strong and independent. Now the woman was watching as that transformation unfolded before her eyes. Even though they didn't talk as often, the woman could still see the changes in the girl. She had become more confident, more certain of herself. She was finding her own path, making her own decisions, and forging her own identity. The woman couldn't help but feel a bittersweet pride as she watched the girl navigate the world with a sense of purpose. She had always known this was what she was preparing her for, this moment when she could step into the world and thrive on her own. But as the girl's independence grew, so did the woman's realization that she was no longer the center of the girl's world. That space, once so firmly occupied by the woman, was now being filled with the girl's own life, new friends, new experiences, and new dreams. And while that was exactly what she had hoped for, it also left the woman feeling a little lost at times. She found herself spending more time alone. The house was quieter now, and the woman had to get used to the silence that had once been filled with the girl's laughter, her music, and her constant questions. There were days when the woman felt like she didn't know what to do with herself anymore. For so long, she had been focused entirely on raising the girl, and now that the girl was no longer dependent on her in the same way, the woman had to rediscover her own life. It wasn't easy. She missed the girl terribly, even though she was proud of the person she had become. The woman had always known that letting go was part of the process, but that didn't make it any less painful. She had been the girl's mother in every way that mattered, and watching her leave the nest was one of the most difficult things she had ever faced. But she also knew that it was a necessary part of life, a part of the journey that the girl needed to take for herself. Over time, the woman began to fill the empty spaces in her life with new interests, new activities, and new goals. She spent more time with her friends, reconnecting with people she had lost touch with over the years. She took up new hobbies and began to explore things that had always been on her to-do list. The woman knew that she couldn't rely on the girl to be her whole world anymore. She had to find a new sense of purpose, one that was her own. But even as she began to focus on her own life, the woman never stopped being there for the girl. She still sent texts, still called to check in, still offered advice when asked. Though their relationship had evolved, it was still just as strong. The woman knew that she would always be there for the girl, even if the girl didn't need her in the same way anymore. It was a new chapter in their lives, one that neither of them had anticipated, but the woman was learning to embrace it, to accept that the girl was growing up and stepping into the world. And as she watched her daughter find her way, the woman found herself at peace with the journey they had taken together. One afternoon, the woman received a call from the girl. It was a rare moment, a reminder that even as the girl grew more independent, she still turned to her when she needed support. The woman's heart swelled with pride as the girl shared the news that she had accepted a job offer in another city. It was the kind of news the woman had both anticipated and dreaded. The girl was ready to take the next step in her life, to begin a career and start a new chapter away from home. Though the woman knew this was a significant milestone, she couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. The girl was truly leaving, stepping out on her own in a way she never had before. It was the moment the woman had prepared for all these years, but now that it was happening, it felt like a small part of her was slipping away. The girl was no longer her little one who needed her guidance for everything. She was becoming her own person, creating a life for herself. But as the woman listened to her daughter talk about the excitement and the challenges of this new opportunity, she knew that this was the natural progression of things. She had raised the girl to be independent, to pursue her dreams and to find her own path. The woman felt an overwhelming sense of pride. Pride that her daughter had reached this point, that she had found a career she was passionate about, and that she was ready to take on the world. In the months that followed, the woman continued to support the girl from a distance. They kept in touch, of course, but the dynamic between them had shifted. The woman's role was no longer that of a caretaker, but of a support system, a guide from afar. She no longer had to be involved in every decision the girl made, but she was always there when the girl needed someone to talk to. Over time, the woman began to see just how much she had shaped the woman the girl had become. The strength, the independence, the compassion. It was all a reflection of the love and care the woman had poured into her. And while it was painful to let go, the woman also realized that her work was done. She had given the girl the tools she needed to succeed. And now it was up to the girl to build her own future. As the woman watched the girl embark on her new journey, she couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had been given the opportunity to raise a child who wasn't hers by birth, but who had become her daughter in every way that mattered. She had watched her grow, love, and live a life that was uniquely her own. And while the future was uncertain, the woman knew that the love they shared would remain unchanged. Their story wasn't over. It had evolved, just as all things in life do. And the woman knew that no matter what came next, she would always be there for her daughter, offering love, guidance, and support from wherever she was. They had built something beautiful, a bond that was unbreakable and timeless.